volunteer for over 10 years. It's LarryandFishers.com. I guess once I retired from my real job, I had to find something to do. And that's what I've done. I've also been producing local podcasts for more than 7 years. So I've been asked by the Democratic Party to be the moderator of this event. I'm here in the role of the independent journalist. I'm not associated directly with Democrats, Libertarians, or Republicans. I'm here as an independent journalist to handle the duties, and I'll do that accordingly tonight. I'm not being paid anything for this. I'm still a volunteer, which is fine with me. And any questions I pose to these candidates have not been shared in advance with them. So now my understanding is we all get to introduce ourselves. I will warn you, I'm going to put the microphone, Jeff, permission to put me down a while before it goes on and on. So I'm going to let each candidate introduce themselves, and we'll start from left to right. So.
Hi. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm a teacher, so I don't have any problem projecting my voice. Victoria Garcia-Bulburn, House District candidate for District 32. Brand new district. There's no incumbent. It's a fantastic opportunity to put forward the values of Hamilton County and Northern Marion County residents. Briefly about myself. Just want to share with you that nothing has ever come easy to me in my life. The first in my family to go to college. I saw my dad come home from his labor job as a cement mason, dirty and full of cement, and my favorite thing to do was to put on his construction boots. I thought there was no other hero in the world that I wanted to be like more than my dad. And when he ran for his local union office, I thought I want to do that one day too. I saw him passionately advocate for medical insurance advancements. I saw him passionately advocate for the rights of the marginalized and unheard. And I just wanted to be just like my father when I grew up. So that's my promise to you, is to advocate for those of us that feel like our voices have been silenced these last 10 years. I want to advocate for women. I want to advocate for public school children who deserve to be global learners. And I sure as heck want to make sure that in our state, everyone is welcome and everyone is included. So that's my promise to you, to work hard, to sacrifice, and to make sure that the voices of all Hamilton County and Marion County residents are represented. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. This is probably the biggest crowd we've had. Yeah? So a little behind the scenes. First, my name is Destiny Wells. I'm running for Indiana Secretary of State as a Democrat. And seeing a crowd like this makes it just really feels like it matters so much when we are out on the road. Tom and I. Well, I don't need a mic either. I'm a military officer, so I can project. Can you hear me okay? Yes. So, Mayor Tom and I both started in Lake County today. He went to Lafayette. I went a couple other places, and I came from daycare where I picked up my son in downtown Indy. I called the house and I said, I heard there's going to be television. Can you please turn the curling iron on? And so Victoria and I walked in together. That's what moms do. So democracy has never mattered more for a Secretary of State's race than this year. The January 6th hearings. And so I am running with my military experience. I'm a military intelligence officer. Now I'm in the reserve, a lieutenant colonel. I teach history. We must learn from history. This feels a lot like those interwar years between World War I and World War II when good men sat by and did nothing. And so I do that, and then I'm also an attorney. And like I said, I'm a mom. And when this race became the important race it is, I felt I have to run. I have to throw everything I can into preserving democracy for our children. Why would I spend all that time in a combat theater fighting for the notion of democracy for somebody else if I'm going to come home and turn a blind eye to what's happening in our own backyard? Well, I'll save the rest for the questions, but I do want to say this. We are running on the idea, the fact that we are a purple state with a turnout column.
Hi everybody. My name is Tom McDermott. I'm your Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. I've been mayor of the city of Hammond for 18 years, 5 terms. So I know how to win elections. And I'm also a veteran, just like Destiny. I joined the United States Navy when I was 18 years old. Thank you very much. I'm Destiny, by the way. I'm very proud of that because it makes me a good Democrat. I'm, of course, a husband and a father of 4. Husband of my wife, Marissa, who's the judge of the Lake County Circuit Court. I'm a father of 4. I'm an attorney also. I went to the University of Notre Dame. But most people affiliate me with being their mayor. When I go back home and I hear, hey mayor, I usually know who they're talking to. I come down here to Fishers, I hear, hey mayor, it confuses me, I'll be honest with you. I'm really afraid of what's going on in our country right now. You know, when you see what's going on with women's reproductive rights, I want to make it very clear at the very beginning, I'm 100% pro-choice and I'm 100% pro-women. Very proud of that. The wrongs that have happened in the U.S. Supreme Court, an institution most Americans held in high esteem before it started getting gerrymandered. And it started with Merrick Garland. He should be sitting in the U.S. Supreme Court right now. He shouldn't be our attorney general. Right now, we wouldn't be talking about Dobbs 5-4 overruled versus Roe versus Wade. We'd be talking about Roe versus Wade stood up 5-4 if Merrick Garland's in the U.S. Supreme Court right now, where he should be. I'm very proud to be the only man on the statewide ticket. I look at myself as a big brother to the women that are, and it's no stranger to me. I grew up around women my whole life. My mom was a single mother. I had 2 sisters, my mom and me. So I grew up around women my whole life. I'm happy to fight for women's rights right now because you need a U.S. Senate candidate that's willing to do that. Not a U.S. Senate candidate that's going to sell you out like Todd Young sold us out by approving 3 justices to the court.
I look to you all as a beacon for the rest of the 5th District, and I appreciate your help already in getting me to become your Democratic nominee for Indiana's 5th Congressional District. I'm absolutely honored to be here today. You know who my opponent is? Victoria Sparks. Yes, the 5th Congressional District Congresswoman. I don't know if any of you all have seen her, but she doesn't come around a lot. She's certainly not going to come around here, Tom, is she? Neither is Todd Young, and neither is you guys' opponents. But we are here to represent the best party. We're here to represent the party that only brought you Social Security, it brought you Medicare, it continues to bring you, sorry about that, continues to bring you stimulus checks in the middle of a pandemic. It put shots in arms. It put checks in banks. It helped the Hoosiers, Hoosiers here, and businesswomen and businessmen get through the pandemic. They talk about we may be going through a recession. Well, I'll tell you what, if we're going to go through a recession, thank the Democrats that have bolstered every small business in our state. If we go through one, I think we'll be able to buffer because we've done everything we can to build them up. I'm from Crawfordsville, Indiana. I have 4 kids. I'm a graduate of Ball State. I went there for my undergrad and my graduate. I'm a journalist by trade. I'm a proud American. I'm going to work my butt off because Victoria Sparks needs to be replaced. God bless
you. Good evening, everyone. Is this working? Great. My name name is Jeff Maurer, M-A-U-R-E-R, exactly like it sounds, and very grateful to be here. Thank you to the Indiana Dems for hosting us. I'm the Libertarian candidate for the Secretary of State office, so Destiny Wells and I are both seeking the same office. And like you, I imagine most of us would rather be outside or doing lots of other things on this beautiful evening. But we're here because we're concerned. We're concerned about what our future looks like. We're concerned that our government is making decisions that are not in our interests. And we're concerned that we're losing control over our nation. I'm here because I want to make a difference, I want to make a change, and I want you to have the same tools. Libertarians live by the golden rule. If you've never met a libertarian before, just think about the golden rule. I want to treat you as I'd ask you to treat me. And I want you to have the power and the confidence to know that your vote was counted. 2020, 2016, and for those of us who remember back to 2000, with pregnant chads and hanging chads and dimple chads, we lost control. And no one in this room can point to their vote and say, that's my vote, there it is, it was counted. That's the problem. And that's what I'm here to fix. We're going to do that by giving each of you, and me as well, a receipt. Something crazy, right? You go to a hairstylist or a food truck or to buy a lottery ticket, you get a receipt. A printed receipt that shows you're in, this is the transaction, this is what we agreed to, this is what happened. With that receipt, you can control your government. We need the receipt to have audits that we can trust. Right now, we only audit 5. It's just been doubled to a whopping 10 out of 92 counties. I'm advocating for audits for all 92 counties and audits before elections are certified. Not radical, just good, common, nonpartisan best practices for government. Additionally, I'm a champion of referenda, recall, and ballot initiatives. These are tools that we, the people, control our government. And you might be in favor of recalling a governor or some other state elected officials right now. So think about how your lives would be different if you can go out, collect signatures, and change and recall them from office. I'm Jeff Maurer. I look forward to your questions later this evening. Thank you for being here.
Welcome to Fishers. I am so happy you are here. My name is Jocelyn Bear. I'm an at-large member of the Fishers City Council. I am the first Democrat elected citywide in Fishers a few years ago. Now I'm running for state senate. I'm running for District 31. District 31 is all of Fishers. For the first time, this community is all together in one state senate district. What does that mean? That means this is a Hamilton County seat, and that means that Fishers deserves a dedicated voice on the state senate.
Yeah.
Here's what else that matters. We are very disappointed in how the supermajority at our state house serves us. There are only, my friends, 2 Democratic women on the state senate. Our voices must be heard, and I am here to serve you, to serve Fishers, to serve all of Senate District 31. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everyone saw this is our moment, and we must have our voices heard. This is our chance to work together and prove to the supermajority that they need to listen to us. There is an event scheduled for Hamilton County, sponsored by the Hamilton County Democratic Party, this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. This is at a church just down the street in Fishers, and we are going to gather together to champion women's reproductive rights, our LGBTQ also bipartisan, and we'll work together to have our voice heard across this state. My name is Jocelyn Bear. Thank you. Welcome to Fishers. There's a party outside, there's a party here, right?
Good evening. I'm Sceniak. I'm your Libertarian candidate for the U.S. Senate race. First and foremost, I appreciate you being here because this is what politics is all about. It's about public service, it's about serving you, and it's about a communication across the table and how we can make things better in Washington, D.C. I'm extremely disappointed with Washington, D.C. politics right now, and Todd Young is the problem. Today, he didn't want to be accessible to the public. He told them to turn off their cameras when they were around. He doesn't want to be accountable for every decision he makes in Washington, D.C. This is a problem. He doesn't stand for our constitutional rights. This is an issue. We need a different voice in Washington, D.C. We need someone who's going to represent you, the people. I'm a behavior therapist. I work with kids with autism. And really, it's that philosophy that I want to take to Washington. That it's a service job. It's about giving you guys what you need and your voice is heard. I have 3 things that I'm running on. Fiscal sanity is the first one. Todd Young is a horrible spender. He's one of the worst, and when it comes to inflation, he can't run on this issue because he's part of the issue. The second one is my vet care program. I don't believe veterans are being taken care of by Washington, D.C. They fought for our freedoms, and it's time that we give them the medical freedom that they deserve. And speaking of medical freedom, I believe everybody deserves medical freedom. Our politicians should not act as physicians. This is an overstep by Washington, and it's something that we need to fight for now, because I want the future generations to have the freedoms and opportunity for innovation that past generations have had. It's time that we stand up for our rights, and it's time we consider a fresh, modern approach to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
You all know there's a little noise over from this side of the room. That means time is up. They have 2 minutes for the opening statements, which I forgot to mention at the beginning. They'll have 2 minutes for each of their responses to questions. I want to thank the people here. I have a wide variety of questions already submitted. And the question I had planned to ask first, that question has been asked by many of you, and that's the most recent Supreme Court decision. This is the one on abortion, which was released on Friday of last week. It's only a few days old. Each of you, well, not each of you, many of you have already referred to this. So my question to you is, where do you go as a candidate and propose what needs to happen next, whatever you think needs to happen next, in terms of reacting to this Supreme Court decision on abortion? And on this time we will ask, by the way, Ms. Maurer, do you have a vote yet on the Republican side?
No, that the race continues to be in a recount. Thank you. The race continues to be in a recount, and so we should be knowing who the opponent is probably by the end of July, the latest.
There's a recount going on for the Republican opponent. I just want to make that clear. We don't need to know who she's running against yet. I will ask you to start 2 minutes each. Your view on where society in America goes post-Dodd decision by the Supreme Court.
I think first we need to clarify the false narrative that the Republicans are the party of life. I can think of several pieces of legislation where the Republican Party has actually helped destroy lives. And I can think about the 21 innocent lives that were taken far too soon in Uvalde, Texas. Speaking of Texas, my mother grew up in Southwest Texas, and when the news broke, my first reaction was to call her. She's 78 years old. She shared with me a story about several young girls in the town that went missing. She knew these girls. They shared childhood secrets together. They shared things like being taken advantage of by family members, incidents of incest and rape. And they were taken to the backwoods, and home abortions were performed on them. Their innocence was taken, and as she was telling me this story through tears, she said, please do everything in your power that we don't go back. And so I'm here to say today that we will not go back under my watch. That there are several reasons that a woman may choose to seek reproductive health care in the form of abortion, and that is between her provider and her doctor. When I was on bed rest for the last trimester of my youngest son, there was no support economically. When I wanted to go back to work, when I did not yet ready to go back to work at 12 weeks, I thought to myself, how have we as a country come to this problem where we don't take care of women, we don't take care of small families, and we definitely don't provide economic supports. So that is part of the solution, but I can guarantee you that my goal is to preserve a woman's health care choice to receive an abortion.
When I was in Afghanistan, I was there for about 13 months, 2016, 17, and I remember looking around, where was I for a while, and thinking it would be so awful to live in a country as a woman where you were a second-class citizen. And so, with the rollback of Roe, Indiana, and the legislation that we're looking at, America, is looking at joining the company of countries like Afghanistan, war-torn countries like Iraq, Sierra Leone. I can just go through the list, right? The Republic of the Congo. I mean, this is not good company to have. Even Russia will have more women's reproductive freedom than the United States. And so it makes me wonder, what did I serve for? What did I serve for if I'm going to go back home and feel the same way? If the majority of America supports women's reproductive freedom, supports access to abortion, then why isn't that being reflected through the ballot books? And that's where we have to go. The Supreme Court says we're returning rights to the states so that the voters' voices are accurately heard. No, because the Supreme Court also said we can't do anything, states, about partisan gerrymandering. It's a non-justiciable issue for us. We can't do anything. And so there's a series of other opinions where they just open the gates on campaign finance. And so you see all this money coming in with extreme candidates that are supported by PACs that are outside of Indiana, like my opponent, Diego Morales. And you see that there is no such thing as a fair fight in states. It is all by design. It's been years and years. And so it's going to take a long, concerted effort to start to have voters' rights restored. And so I want to lead the way on that, and I feel very passionately about this subject. Unfortunately, it's just the beginning with Dobbs, Roe, and women's reproductive freedom.
If you're one of the outraged Hoosier women over the reversal of Roe versus Wade, you have to ask yourself what changed. And you only need to look so far back as to 2016, when our U.S. Senator Todd Young was running for office. He made a pledge to pro-life groups that if he was elected senator, he would be 100% opposed to all abortions, even in the cases of rape and incest. And then he gets elected, our U.S. Senator, and Justice Gorsuch comes before him, he votes to confirm. And then Justice Kavanaugh comes before him with all the allegations hanging over Justice Kavanaugh's head, and Todd Young affirms them. And then Justice Amy Coney Barrett comes before him, and Todd Young confirms her. And you would think he's a yes vote on every justice, but it turns out Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson came before him, and he had a problem with her. However, the three justices that Todd Young confirmed were all the three justices that voted to overturn Roe versus Wade. So if you're one of the outraged women in Indiana right now about what's going on with your reproductive rights, I'm here to tell you that Todd Young is to blame. He made a pledge, he followed through with that pledge, and if you're upset about that, the best way you can teach any elected official that ignores the bosses is to vote against them. And let's look at what's going on in Indiana. I have 41 seconds to make this point. In Indiana, the state police superintendent says, don't pass a law that says people can carry around guns. Supermajority knows better. Teachers in Indiana said, please stay out of our classrooms. We know better about what's going on in our classrooms than you. And the supermajority said, we know better. And the women said, please stay out of my medical decisions. Let us make decisions for ourselves. And they're going to do it to you next week also, ladies. The supermajority thinks they know better than all of us. And it's time for us to teach them a lesson and vote all on Maurer.
Doesn't come as a surprise. She's not in the Senate, she's not going to be voting for the next judge, but she's on the side that works actively to make sure that women's reproductive rights are in the hands of a bunch of people in Congress. Quite honestly, that is not where it belongs. In no way, shape, or form should an abortion even be discussed with other people? Ask me how I know. And some of you saw me on Channel 13 this past weekend. I talked about my personal experience with abortion. I went to college at Ball State University as a 17-year-old. Quite honestly, pastor's daughter, took the purity pledge, all that stuff. Determined to stay pure until I got married. Fortunately, I trusted the wrong person in a date rape situation, and I found myself pregnant at 18, barely 18 years old. I was in a situation where I was lonely, I was sad, I was scared.
Hey, why don't we pause it and stop the clock and get the chairs in and give it the proper amount of time?
I was in a situation, can you hear me? I was in a situation, sorry. Can't hear me? I don't know how to say it. Okay. I was in a situation where, I found myself alone and scared. I'm a believer, I'm a person of faith, I love the Lord, I try to do everything right, but sometimes, just like with other women today, who will find themselves in situations where they are facing an unwanted pregnancy. I used to be afraid that anybody would find out. Even though they knew the situation, the emotional tailspin I was in, I was still afraid that people of faith would find out and castigate me to hell. That is the truth. And you know what? The bottom line is, it is no one's business what I did. I was not ready to be a mama, but I tell you what, you know what? When I was able to graduate, go to grad school, and be okay, I was able to adopt 4 hard-to-place minority children who are now all mine. This is always seems to be a woman's issue, and yes, it is at the end of the day. But men, Hoosier men, need to take the cause up. I am going to spearhead movements for the next 4 or 5 months in every single county: Howard, Tipton, Delaware, Hamilton, Grant, and Madison. And we are going to have men-led rallies and protests all over the 5th District. I want you all to get behind me, because the bottom line, it takes 2.
I'd like to approach this problem from the office of the Secretary of State, which is limited to elections and business services, and Libertarians believe in limited government. And so if I'm running for county dog catcher, it's not my role to talk about foreign policy. But within the Secretary of State's office, there are a couple important tools I mentioned in the opening that are important for us to solve and address this very issue. So the question is about the Supreme Court and the ruling. That's the judicial branch, right? Secretary of State is executive branch. It's about responding within the confines of that office. And here, we're lacking, all of us, you and me alike, whatever your views, whatever my views, we're lacking the tools to control our government. Namely 2 things. 1 is recall, and 2 is ballot initiative or referendum. Where Tom, you just mentioned a moment ago, wouldn't it be nice to vote somebody out of office? Yes. Wouldn't it be nicer to not have to wait 6 years and count on them forgetting that we're mad? Right? That's what recall does. So imagine if you're mad as heck and you can go to all your neighbors and get enough signatures, and that is enough to legally start the process to pull somebody out of office. Maybe even before they call a special session in the General Assembly to vote on who knows what. Wouldn't that be a nice tool to have? That's what I want for you. Because ultimately, I believe the government derives its power from you and from me. Let's talk a moment about referendum. Same concept. It's putting the laws that we choose for ourselves. We have a large supermajority government that is too often in the way of what we want. Ballot initiatives and referenda are laws that we create by ourselves, and they go effectively directly into law. We don't have to depend on a bunch of people who are elected, who have money, who have control on government, and who are paid to not listen to us and tax us for that privilege. That's what referenda does. And so we need that as a tool to empower us to be able to put people into office and take people out of office when we say so. Thank you.
personal, important decision a woman can ever make. And I cannot think of one person currently serving on the Supreme Court or now in our State House that is qualified in any way, shape, or form to make that decision for a woman. There are many of us in our community, men and women alike, who are grieving where our country is right now. And I'm here to tell you that our State House supermajority now has all the authority to make the decisions for us. That is unacceptable. And for a woman's dignity should not be determined by an elected official or any political reflection or consideration. This is personal, and this is the dignity of a woman. I just want to add, as my daughter is 25, she is a young woman, and frankly, the overturning of Roe does not affect me personally, but it affects all of us as a community. And my daughter is 25, and she's having to recalibrate her whole life. I'm here to tell you that I will fight for a woman's reproductive right, and any obstacle that comes in her way must be removed so that she has the dignity to make her own decisions. This issue is personal for all of us, but now is the time that we have to take it seriously and fight. And the last thing I'll mention is this. We know our State House supermajority is motivated by politics and motivated by headlines. There is a good opportunity for us to make a difference by having our voices heard and speaking into the economy and the business community that will also take up this charge with us to make Indiana the best state in the country. Thank you.
I recognize that this is a very sensitive issue. It's an issue that separates neighbors, it separates families, and otherwise we could be civil, but this is an issue that people understand is important. I want to take a little bit of a different approach. Did you know during since Roe versus Wade, 4 times the Republicans have held a supermajority? They keep on running a pro-life agenda, but they never did anything with these supermajorities. Now I'm going to tell you something that you might be a little disappointed in. The Democrats also held supermajorities 4 times since Roe versus Wade. Now why should you be disappointed? Because they could have secured women's rights. The idea is that politicians keep running on emotional issues to manipulate votes instead of focusing on solutions. We have to focus on solutions in order to make a difference. Now, I absolutely believe that our politicians should not act as physicians, and I believe that bans are not the way to go. But I am a social pro-life advocate, and by that I mean I want to reduce abortion by giving economic opportunities, by supporting adoption and by supporting foster care, which are all personal issues. If we create a society that sustains more life, then abortion is automatically reduced. But that's not by banning abortions or taking away anybody's rights. It's by simply saying, hey, everybody deserves the opportunity to make these decisions with the best opportunities that are available to them. Again, I recognize this is a very sensitive issue, and I thank you guys for listening. But consider what politicians are really saying in Washington, D.C. Every single one has always said, I'm pro-choice, or I'm pro-life, but they rarely give solutions. We need solutions.
You had a very wide variety of questions that come from the audience, but I'm going to provide a couple of them. I watched the January 6th committee today. I'm a retired guy, and I watch these things. And I watched most of the rest of it, just soaking it all in. But I have 2 questions I want to combine that deals with the election process and voting. I have specific interest to our Secretary of State candidates, but really all candidates have some role in this. A couple of questions, a couple of areas I'd like you to address that have come from the audience. The first one basically is, how do we renew trust in the election process with the election process under so much attack at the moment? And if you can also incorporate this as far as voting. One person basically said, my daughter says it's too difficult to vote. How can we make it easier for people to vote? So this is all about voting in the election process. And as we do a different, we'll go from Mr. Sceniak and move the other way. So Mr. Sceniak, please start that discussion.
Yeah, the process needs to be well informed. Voters, we need to get voices out, and ultimately, even those who are registered to vote aren't voting. So this is important because we need to hear from the voices of the people. How are we supposed to have democracy if we can't even vote? When it comes to registering to vote, I remember as a 17-year-old, my first presidential election, I was super excited. I was at a county fair, and I actually went up to a Democrat booth, and they're like, hey, how old are you? I'm 17. Are you going to be 18 by the election? Yes. Here's how you register. And they ran me through that process. And for that, I have a lot to thank the Democrats for, because I understood how to vote then. But ultimately, we have to make it easy. We have to give solutions to young voters who want to have their voice heard. And we do this by informing them, by being welcoming, exactly how the Democrats were to me as a 17-year-old, and showing them that process. Because if nobody shows them that process, they won't understand it.
Hamilton County has one of the most available early voting and voting day opportunities. Not every county is like that. And Marion County, it's a completely, south of 96th Street, it's a completely different situation. So that is one thing for me, and I'll look to our amazing Secretary of State candidate to work on this. Statewide availability needs to be equal and barriers removed. Be accessible and convenient for people. But I think, frankly, another big problem is just voter apathy. And these two parties, political parties standing in front of you, really struggle to get our voters out. We know, thank you, Destiny, this is a purple state. Hamilton County is a purple county. But if we cannot get folks to the polls, the supermajority is able to take over and demonstrate an authority and a majority that is absolutely false. So that's another thing. I think I'm very glad to be here tonight and working bipartisan in a bipartisan fashion, because this community, this county, this state is very diverse. It is not a bright red state. And despite gerrymandering, we need to make sure that we get voters out and prove, no matter how many candidates are on the ballot or how long it takes or how inconvenient it is, every vote counts. So my challenge to each of you, get out. Not only I can count on you to vote, I know. Talk to 10 people between now and November 8th and get them voting. Help them make a plan, get them registered, show them online, talk to our college students who desperately need to vote. Our younger voters are going to carry this state to a whole new direction.
I'm going to ask a favor from everybody in the room. Listen for solutions. I bet everybody in here, actually show of hands, let's do this. Who here wants elections that are less trustworthy? Okay, so none of us, great. So we all want the same thing. The challenge is, how do we get there? How do we get from where we are, which we don't trust our elections, to where we want to be? So I'm going to ask all of you to listen for solutions. So the solution I'm offering is actual trust. It's the trust of transaction. It's the proof of a transaction. It's the proof of your vote in a receipt. It is a printed receipt that you get to take home with you and put in your pocket. This is not a wild and crazy idea. I bet you've all done this already today and certainly this week. In Indiana right now, 60% of every vote cast doesn't have any paper trail whatsoever. It's one computer's word against yours. I don't know how that makes you feel, but I don't trust that. So I want a printed receipt for you, I want a printed receipt for me. And with that basis of trust, We can start to engage people, young people, old people, people who are frustrated with the broken system, people who think that the government's just going to keep on doing what government does, which is why they don't show up. Let me ask you a rhetorical question. If you had a choice of picking orange or cherry poison, which would you pick? I'd pick neither. It's poison, right? So why show up? Why go through the effort of voting, go through all this hassle, if it means nothing's different? And that's why we have a turnout problem. If we can take back that control, if we can show that government's accountable to us, if we can recall elected officials, then suddenly government's afraid of us, not us afraid of them. And with that power, that is when we start to get people to show up to vote. Now, let me make a comment on the difficulty of voting. Sometimes there's a good reason why things should be hard. It's difficult to join the military. When I joined the Air National Guard and continue to serve here in Indiana, it's difficult. We don't want to just join the app and be able to vote that afternoon. We should make the pathway clear and defensible, but we should be careful about how easy we make it. Thank you.
Who here is for a national day election? That's a start, right? There's a woman at my church in Muncie, Mother Cherry is what we call her. In the 1960s, when she was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, she and her co-workers, I can't remember exactly where they worked, they went and saw Martin Luther King. The next morning, it was in the paper that they were there and they had all their signs and everything. Several of them went from the same position and the same employer. They got to work. Each of them was fired. Each of them was fired. She had to go out and find a new job, and she and several of her co-workers, because they protested and wanted to make a better society for themselves and for their children. We're at 2022 today. Gerrymandering is all, Indiana is the 14th worst state or something like that, and when it comes to that, voter suppression for minority cities and communities, disenfranchised, disinvested communities. There's a reason why they want your vote. Because it's worth something. I challenge every single person here today. I know we've got four big months, July, August, September, and October. 4 full months to get more people registered to vote. Because one of the things that Destiny keeps preaching everywhere she goes is that we are not a red state and we're not a blue state. We are a purple state with a voter registration problem, right? Or something like that. She's going to tell you. But it's the truth. It really is the truth. IndianaVoters.org has a way for every single person registered to vote. I challenge every person in this room. Do you all think that you can get 5 or 10 people a month the next 4 months registered to vote? Because I'm telling you what, that is going to be the change. That is going to be the change. Thank you all.
One thing I've learned in 18 years of being Hammond's mayor is democracy is participatory. Meaning, when I invest in the citizens in Hammond, I find that they get interested and they invest in return. And the reason I bring that up right now is, look at this room. We have a couple hundred people in here. We have Libertarian candidates. You have Democratic candidates. Every stop on this tour, we've invited the Republican candidates to a person to attend with us, and they have chose not to attend, not to participate. What is it about when you get elected to become a U.S. Senator, you can suddenly say, I don't need to talk to Hoosiers anymore? Why do we allow that as Ty Nun's boss? Why does he have the option to not show up tonight? It's because he's promised. He doesn't think he needs your support. He thinks no matter what he does, he's going to get elected anyway. Why? I got $5 million. Why should I talk to Hoosiers if I have $5 million? And we allow this. January 6th was a dark day in history. I didn't serve 6 years in the United States Navy. I did that because I believe in the Constitution and the peaceful transfer of power. Okay? And I lost an election. I did. It's not something I love talking about. I lost an election in 2020. I didn't think a lot of it had to do with me. As we'll all remember, we were going through a pandemic in 2020. One of the strongest things about my campaign is being able to go out and talk to people like yourselves. I was locked in my basement, just like all of us were. And I was bitter about that. I lost a race because I couldn't shake hands and I couldn't give speeches. But you know what I did on election night? I called the guy that beat me, Frank Maurer. And I congratulated Frank. I said, you're going to be a great congressman. I'm going to support you in November. I think you ran a great race. And I probably didn't mean everything I was saying to him. Okay? I was pissed off and bitter, okay? But I did the right thing. And I'm a lowly mayor. I'm a lowly mayor. And I did the right thing for democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. And Donald Trump, the President of the United States, couldn't do the same thing. And that's why we're in the situation we are in today with January 6th. Thank you.
So it's been a minute, but I think you asked us, how do we get Hoosiers hope and confidence restored in elections, first and foremost. So we do that by having a Secretary of State who is pro-democracy. I'm going around in Indiana and I'm saying, look, I'm the pro-democracy candidate on the ballot. You don't have to be a Democrat or Republican or any party affiliation to vote for democracy. And those are the options this year. Now, Jeff, you talked about solutions. I don't believe a receipt is a solution. I believe a receipt is just further stoking fears in Hoosiers that their vote doesn't count. They don't have a problem with thinking their vote counts. They have a problem with thinking their vote matters. That's where we are, and that's where the solutions need to come from. We need Hoosiers to believe that their vote, actually, that they have agency at the ballot box when they show up. We don't want to make voting harder. Heck, this year we just at least want to maintain the status quo. Okay? 28 days of early voting, that's great. Diego Morales wants 14. Strict voter ID already, okay, I think that we can loosen that up a little. But hey, Diego Morales wants you to prove that you are a citizen at the polls. I think that means bringing your birth certificate. Quite frankly, I have no idea where mine is. And it's just another piece of paperwork to make it harder. We can do these things in a secure way. And when it comes to youth saying it's a little too hard to vote, we need to actually engage our youth. When college students come into Indiana, I'm going to be telling them, your vote, we need your vote here more than Jersey. Yeah. We need your vote here more than California. Yeah. We need you to show up because this is your future. And we need to be talking directly to them and making sure that they understand how important voting is. Because we are not painting a future for them with January 6th hearings right now that they have a future to care about. Right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have many, many solutions, Jeff. Thank you.
Stand last time because I felt like I was in my living room with you all, so don't take that as an insult. I'm very welcome here. How many of you were at the Spark Fishers Parade? Okay. Then you saw my 9-year-old son scream at the top of his lungs, vote, 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 vote for my mom, vote. So when you tell somebody enough, hopefully they get the right message. But as my friend Destiny just said, we have some of the most restrictive voter access laws in the country. And then we want to elect a Secretary of State who's even going to make those laws more restrictive? That sounds ludicrous to me. Let me give you some things that you should feel passionate about voting for. We have the 3rd highest maternal mortality rate in the country. We have a 750 to 1 mental health care provider to patient access. So if you're struggling post-pandemic to see a counselor or a therapist, you're not alone. 750 to 1. We have some of the dirtiest drinking water in our nation. And by the way, the governor, he just signed one of the most loosest gun laws in the country. So if you're not fired up to vote, friends, if you think that voting doesn't affect your livelihood, please at least remember those 4 things I just said. It does. And if you want things to change, you not only have to vote, but as my friend said, Janine Lake, you have to bring 10 other people with you. You have to have a voting plan. You have to bring your son, your daughter, your grandchildren, your neighbors. You have to vote.
most senior citizen on the stage. I hope you don't mind if I sit. Speaking of guns, we have a question on guns, and the questioner posits the following. That Hamilton County had 114 gun suicides between 2015 and 2019. I haven't fact-checked that, but I do know that statistics nationally are very high. The number of gun-related suicides are very high in this country. So the question from the questioner and the audience is, what do you plan to do to alleviate the gun crisis? That's the way the questioner put it. So I guess I would soften the question a bit and just say, what about firearms? Started to mention a few times.
No need to soften it.
No
Excuse me?
softening.
Okay.
No softening.
How would you move forward as far as gun policy is concerned, based on Supreme Court decisions and other decisions being made at the federal and state level? I'm going to ask Mr. McDermott to start, and we'll move in that direction.
I'm going to quote from the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia. Regulated is the second word, and regulation means laws. So oftentimes from the other party, I hear things like, it's the Second Amendment, you can't pass any laws that limit it in any capacity whatsoever, and that's absolutely not true. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in the state of Indiana, and laws are passed all the time that deal with the First Amendment, which was placed first because it was the most important to our founding fathers. Quite frankly, if you read the Second Amendment, it sounds to me like they're talking about a militia. We don't talk about militias very often anymore because we have a standing army, which we didn't have when we passed the Second Amendment. So I don't agree with the philosophy that Congress can't pass laws that deal with weapons. Violent crime is a cancer in society. You don't need to tell me. I'm the mayor of Hammond, Indiana. South side of Chicago is my next door neighbor. This is a fact of life I'm dealing with on a daily basis. And one of the reasons I'm so close to the Hammond Police Department and law enforcement in general is because we have to get a grip on gun crimes. In Indiana, I don't need to talk to anybody that lives in Marion County. I don't need to talk to anybody that lives in the region. This is an everyday problem. Now, when we send our kids off to school, we have to worry about whether or not they're going to come home. Or whether when we go to church, we have to worry about whether or not we're going to make it home. Or even shopping. You know, the fact is this. You know, I understand when somebody makes an argument about a shotgun for defensive purposes, or they have a card-carrying member and they have a pistol. But I just don't understand how you can have military-style assault weapons and justify that under the Second Amendment. Because our founding fathers... When kids would go out to school and be massacred in school, and people would hold up the Constitution as a justification for that slaughter. I do not stand for that, and I promise to be a soldier for Moms Demand Action, who recently
Yes, I too was recently given the distinction as a common sense gun legislation candidate by Moms Demand Action. For sure doing the real work. They do the knocking on the doors, they make the phone calls, and they're pressing Congress to do everything they can. In 2022, when this latest situation happened in Uvalde, Texas, and all those poor children were slaughtered along with a couple of teachers, my heart, like yours, sank. I honestly still can't believe we're talking about the same issues with AR-15s, AKs, those assault weapons which need to be banned. That's one of the first things we must ban assault weapons. We need a national red flag law. We need stricter background checks so that if you go to one state and you plant something over there, they can figure out who you are and that they're dangerous. We must work together. We actually need to do a better enforcing the laws that are actually already on the record, and that is the truth. When Sandy Hook happened, I thought for sure Obama and Congress would be able to get something done. They didn't. But now we have 20-some years and hundreds of thousands of more people that have been affected by gun violence. If we can't get it done now, and we can't move forward in the Senate and in Congress, something is really wrong with us as a nation. Like Tom said, we go to church and we're afraid. We go to school and we're afraid. We go to the movie theater and we're afraid. We can't hear it. And quite honestly, I was looking at the exit door. I know I'm not the only one. As your 5th congressional candidate, I will do everything in my power to make sure that we have common sense gun legislation. There is no way in the world I want to wake up any day and see in our community that this has hit us one more time.
Within the confines of the Secretary of State's office, again, I know that sounds really funny, right? But limited government. We'll stay focused on what our job is. The job is to give you the tools to choose the government that you want for yourselves. I think we can agree to disagree on gun issues. I may have a very different opinion from everybody else in this room, and that's okay. I respect that. Elections are how we, as a society, as a civilization, agree to disagree. And when we no longer have that commonality, that conversation through the ballot box, we lose trust, we lose faith, we resort to violence. And that is the travesty of January 6th. That's what I'm trying to prevent here. So even if we agree to disagree on this one issue, where can we agree that we should have the voice and tools to put change in place, to actually choose our laws and set our government? And this goes back to recall. So if you're not satisfied with the constitutional carry law that now will go into effect July 1st, then as a solution, you should have recall, right? You should be able to recall a governor or a member of the General Assembly, senator or state house, to say, I don't like the way that you voted. I'm going to recall you. You should have referenda, things that protect you, protect spaces, or whatever laws or legislation you think is the best route to achieving the change that you want in your community. I want the same for myself, and I want these tools for all of us, because ultimately it's we the people, right? This is where we have to come together in peace to choose the government and laws for ourselves. I asked you to listen for solutions, and I just want to challenge one thing here. Two things. First, we're in the public library, right? If I check out a book, I'm happy to borrow it, I get a receipt for it. That's not the librarian stoking fear and worrying that I'm going to come back and revolt or steal a book. It's documentation of transaction. We both have confidence. The library has confidence that I borrowed it. I have confidence that I owe it. The second thing is the only solution I've heard is that the Democrats are now counting on out-of-state young college voters to win the election.
No, sorry. Kids might go to college out of state and they're still residents here.
I am a gun sense candidate that has been recognized, and I am grateful for that. This is an important designation, so as you go out and vote and look at all the candidates on your ballot, please look for gun sense candidates. I would like to share with you when the State House was considering permitless carry. I was at the testimony at the State House for the Senate, and I found myself, the room was packed. I found myself shoulder to shoulder with our Fishers police chief. And I asked him what he was doing there, and he said, I am here to testify against permitless carry, along with many law enforcement officials that were there that day. We know that Hoosiers demand gun sense and strong legislation that allows Second Amendment freedoms within guidelines, within sensible guidelines that keeps Hoosiers safe. When I spoke to Chief Gephardt that day, he said, I'm about to testify, but it's not going to matter. I would like to applaud Moms Demand Action because they, like Chief Gephardt, realize our State House supermajority is failing us. They are failing Hoosiers, and they know what good gun safety is, and they are rejecting it. And that is for political purposes. So, as a gun sense candidate, I am here to stand up. I have learned so much from Moms Demand Action because not only are they promoting good gun sense candidates, but they're educating the public, educating our neighbors. And that is from everything from the language we use and talk about gun sense to taking responsibility in our neighborhoods and in our homes and making sure that guns are secure, making sure we are asking those hard questions. So again, I want to just recognize Moms Demand Action because you are changing the conversation about guns in our communities and in our state. Thank you for your hard work.
I'd like to address the first part of that question first. The part about suicide, and this is a very personal issue. I remember when I was about 18, I got a call and it said, look, your best childhood friend just committed suicide. But that wasn't with a gun. It was overdosing. So suicide is a very real issue, and it's not just a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. Same thing with violence. Violence is a real issue, we all want solutions. But I challenge you to look for those solutions. I heard today on the stage that I'm afraid to go here, I'm afraid to go here, and I'm afraid to go here. I have a minority sister, and I don't want her to have fear. If her choice is to carry to defend herself, I will fight for that right at all costs. I don't want a rapist to come and be able to overtake her. She needs to be able to defend herself. When we talk about violence, violence has actually decreased in the last 30 years, with an exception. The exception is twice, 2 years. Both were during COVID. This tells me a lot about violence. It tells me that when people aren't seeing the opportunities, they're not seeing a productive society, they're more inclined to violence. We need to address mental health issues, and that is a very important part. Even the act that was just passed, that did address mental health issues. But we don't have to just address those issues while taking away your rights. We can address those issues and secure the rights to defend people like my sister through people who could victimize her.
I'm going to try to project. You might notice a theme because I too am a gun sense mom man. And I also need to share with you that gun laws are very personal to me. I am the wife of a retired police officer who served his city for 13 years. And for 13 years, I wasn't sure if my husband was going to come home. And that is a real fear. And I think police wives are some of the baddest people out there because we deal with a lot. And I have to push back on your comment just a little bit. Operating a gun is not easy. Operating a gun has consequences, even for the most highly trained professional. Operating a gun requires training, both physical and mental. There are real-life consequences to operating a gun and taking somebody's life. Real-life consequences. I'm also here to say that with common sense gun laws, there can be duality. With proper background checks, proper gun safe storage, we can own a gun responsibly. But what I cannot stand for is being able to purchase a gun without any sort of filter mechanism to support people like my husband and keep our law enforcement community safe. If we don't listen to our experts, who will we listen to?
You've noticed the brain drain in Indiana, you've noticed the lack of educational attainment. So when college students come here and they are eligible to vote, that is the first investment that we make in them to stay here, is to get them involved in the civic process. laws, but those laws only catch up with people when something bad happens. Okay, and then I don't want to wait to go purchase a gun. I should have it right now. That's Jim Lucas for you. I don't know if you know Jim Lucas from down in Seymour. I should have it right now. Wait, but you say that we need to practice responsibility to vote. So you want to make it easier to access weapons, but harder to vote in the name of responsibility? I also am a mom's demand gun since candidate. I got to know many of you at the State House, and I gave testimony with you, and you inspired me, and I thank you for being here. It is moms and dads too that support Moms Demand, stepping up and making sure that our country is safer. But I just want to make sure you know I've handled every weapon system there is, and I can tell you how many accidental discharges there are in theater, in a combat zone, and there are plenty. And so they are dangerous, and they do take personal responsibility. So make voting easier. Make carrying a weapon more responsible.
Well, it comes as no surprise that there is a question about the economy, and particularly the state of the economy. The economy is a mixed bag right now. The gas prices are high, inflation is high. If you want to sell your house, you're encouraged to buy a place to live, not so much. So I guess this will be a general question on the economy for the Secretary of State. Candidates are welcome to weigh in if you wish, but I'm sure the other candidates, both state and federal governments, have a big impact on the economy. So I'm going to ask Mr. Maurer if you wish to begin the discussion, and we'll go to Jocelyn and move from there. We're going to take a moment to do a technical adjustment here.
Toast.
2 minutes. So the Secretary of State's office, again, not within the confines of the economy, but the same principles and tools apply. If you don't like the way your elected officials are spending your money, and tax dollars are your money, you should have the tools to pull them out. You should have the tools to tell them, force them to listen, and say, please don't buy that, please don't spend that, please don't commit to that, because that's not fiscally responsible. That's not financially sound. That's not how I would manage my own household. Who here is seeing price of milk go up, price of gas go up, price of everything go up, right? Show of hands. Anyone not experiencing that? Show of hands? Okay, everybody, it's all of us. And I was just looking at a graph of, this is where I get excited, graph of the dollars printed by the Federal Reserve under every different presidency. And under Trump, he printed about $4 trillion. That's $4 million. So we've got about 6.5 million people in the state. Just imagine $1,000 per person. If he can do that, and then we can get into President Joe Biden, who then prints another couple trillion and is still in the business of printing money, we lose control over those choices. That's what's driving inflation. These are just promises that are being made in our names, and we don't have the bank account to back it up. Inflation, plain and simple. So we can hold senators, we can hold governors, we can hold elected congressmen, congresswomen responsible for not spending, not printing money that we don't have, and that we'll have to pay off, or more realistically, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have to pay off. So I asked you to think about the tools of the office and the tools that you as voters should rightfully have to be able to control your elected representatives and get them to stop spending. Thank you.
This might shouldn't be so tricky, but they are. So by the end of the evening, your candidates are going to figure out these mics, and we're going to see that. So Hamilton County is one county in the state that has the highest household income. However, we definitely have some economic problems, and I will focus on our housing problems. Right now in Hamilton County, and this is a problem statewide and as well as countrywide, our housing has become so inflated that a working class family household cannot afford a reasonable home. And I will tell you, one of the reasons that I was motivated to run for state senate was because I saw that the state house legislation impacts what we can do at a city level to help some of these very tactical, smart, wise opportunities to lower the cost of housing, moderate it, bring it down so that folks have an opportunity to purchase a home either for the first time or, very importantly, especially in our communities here in Hamilton County, we do not have any housing to accommodate either young families, young adults, and the older senior citizens who want to downsize. So what we're left with is a very narrow housing stock that only pertains to few people that can live here in Hamilton County. So I am a proponent of taking advantage of every legislative opportunity that we have to try to bring the level of housing down, and there are many tactics that we can employ for that. But right now I will say that on a municipal level, our hands are tied. We must rely on our state house to allow municipalities to have more flexibility, to try new housing options and new creative options to bring the cost of housing down to accommodate all of our residents here in Hamilton County.
This election cycle, you're going to be told lie after lie after lie. And it's going to come from Todd Young. He's going to lie and say the economy is Biden's fault. He's going to say the economy is everybody else's fault. But he served us for 6 years as a senator and longer as a congressman, and he is one of the worst spinners in Washington, D.C. What we're facing is direct consequence of how Todd Young votes. The waste in Washington, D.C. is atrocious. We need to bring more accountability, lower spending, be more responsible with our money. Right now, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. And what's really frustrating about this, I look at the next generation and my nieces and my nephews, and I look at the opportunities that they will have if we keep letting Washington do this. We need to bring responsibility back to Washington because that's the only way to help your dollar, help your wallet. When we see the price of gas go from $30 to $50 to fill up the tank, when we see dinner tables, I bought groceries, $40 for 2 days of groceries. This is real-time inflation that we're seeing, and it is hurting your wallet. How do we fix this? We've got to control spending in Washington, D.C. We've got to stop printing so much money from the Fed. We have to slow down that process. This is something that economically we can talk about Tunisian economics and Australian economics, but in layman's terms, this is about bringing accountability and making sure that our taxes are spent wisely and not wastefully.
A different approach on the economy. I know eventually I will have an opponent, and I know that the opponent I think I will have is going to hit this hard. But I'm here to tell you that education equals economy. That a robust workforce equals economy. That healthcare and quality of life equal economy. But we can't talk about the economy like it is it's a concept in isolation. It is not. So if we stop funding our public schools, if we refuse to acknowledge the expertise of our teachers, don't we think that's going to have an economic effect, friends? Indiana suffers from an incredible brain drain. I don't know if you remember,
they talked about expansion, they didn't choose expansion in Indiana. We are not retaining our talented young people. I am a Hoosier by choice. I chose to stay here, and I will vow to make it better.
Okay, hear me? Your time's a charm, right? So I don't have to shoehorn the economy into the confines of the Secretary of State's office, because the Secretary of State's office has these two divisions called the Securities Division and the Business Services Division. So actually, the Secretary of State's office can have quite an impact on the Hoosier economy. The Secretary's division is there to protect investors and also to promote economic growth. The Business Services Division could be expanded. We could be thinking about things more creatively. If you go to the website now, you'll see programming toward millennials on, using financial sense. I'm here to say, I'm a millennial, and we probably need to redo that programming on the Secretary of State's office. I want to just give a quick anecdote, because what this has allowed me to do in running for this office is to go to some pretty cool events that I wouldn't have found myself in otherwise. And 2 weeks ago, I went to InnoPower, and InnoPower is ran by a former NFL player that wants to improve the Black business ecosystem. So I got to sit in with them and listen, and we mapped out the Black business ecosystem in Marion County. And we talked about a lot. I actually was the government wonk over there being like, well, there's this agency and this agency. And they said, well, what do they do? And I said, don't worry, they don't do anything that they're really helping you. But in theory, they do this and they do that and they do this. And we had a big conversation about the gaps in those ecosystems. And there are places where the Secretary of State's office can help in licensing small businesses, but also making sure that we follow through. It's not just about Secretary Sullivan bragging about how many business licenses were licensed. It's also about following the metrics and seeing where government is selling businesses short and those businesses failing in that very important 6 months, year in that starting business.
The Republican Party, including my opponent Todd Young, wants you to believe that Biden's responsible for the inflation that we're facing, for the gas prices we're facing, and it's so simple-minded, but he wants people to buy that to hide his abysmal track record of 12 years in Washington, D.C., doing nothing to lower the cost of inflation, doing nothing to lower the cost of gas. He wants you to ignore that and just blame it on Biden. However, it doesn't explain the fact that European Union is experiencing high inflation right now. Gas prices across the world are high now for a number of reasons. Supply chain shortages, sure. We're just coming out of a pandemic. War in Europe, sure. That's going to drive up the price of gas, right? Oil executives making huge bonuses, yeah, you got to factor that in as well, right? We got oil inflation. We got food inflation. Ukraine's not exporting grain like they used to, which is going to try to drive up the cost of goods across the world, right? You got wage inflation. Try posting a job for the minimum wage in Indiana and see how fast that job gets filled. There's a number of reasons we're dealing with inflation right now. And if you'll remember, right as we were heading into the pandemic, the Federal Reserve and the President of the United States at the time, Donald Trump, made a decision they didn't want to crash the American economy. So they came up with a number of programs that sent aid to Hoosiers and to Americans where they give them money, gave it to businesses so that they get through the pandemic, right? Even lately, the ARP, $1 billion came to the state of Indiana. Infrastructure, $7 billion came to the state of Indiana. You take all these factors, add it together, and that's why we're dealing with sky-high inflation right now. It's so easy to blame Biden for all the world's problems, but Todd Young, when he does that, he's trying to hide his own incompetence. Because the fact is, he and the Republican supermajority could lower the cost of gas right now $1 per gallon in Indiana, and they refuse to do it.
I'm last, so what they said. You're going to go after Tom McDermott, Mayor Hammond, and I know, I have all my notes, I was like, what what didn't he say, but it's the truth. I mean, corporate greed is at its highest since the 1950s. You got $34 billion umbrella packages that are going out to these CEOs. I mean, that is a problem without a doubt. All the things that they said truly are where we're at now. Prayerfully, like I said before, because this administration took steps to bolster businesses, to bolster families, I still believe, even if a recession does hit us within the next several months or the next several weeks, I believe we're still in a position to be able to be okay as a nation. And I actually believe that. Yeah, that's what they said.
This is the last question. You're going to love this question. I'm going to read it exactly as it was submitted. How do we live together? What is your vision for humanity? Specifics, please. That's the question.
Well, I guess I'll answer this question the same way I answer it to my children. So I have three. I have three children. I have a 16-year-old, 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old that you heard about. And they come home with all sorts of different opinions, different passions. One is short-tempered. One is an artist, and we're still trying to figure out how we get along. And one is a sports enthusiast. And I remind them that diversity in all of its forms, even if we don't agree, is still a beautiful thing. And in fact, it's the foundation of this country. We are not supposed to be the same. Ellis Island, crossing rivers. My parents always joke that they didn't cross the border crossed them. We came here with open arms. And I think that when we forget that point, that we can all have different opinions, but still coexist, I think that's the danger of it. So we have to push back. We have to say, there is another way. That I do love my neighbor as myself, even if we vote different, and even if we go to a different church on Sunday, and even if we don't go to a church at all. That's the type of Christianity that I believe. And I think and rightly so, but I celebrate your religion and your beliefs and your identity and your culture, because that's what being American means.
I didn't mention this earlier. I'm a farm kid from Martinsville. So I tell you what, I had a lifetime of training and talking across the aisle. And we had a convention last weekend, the Democratic Party convention. Republicans had theirs too. I don't know if you saw in the news, they took democracy out of their platform. Anyway, that was the question. I brought my farmer dad and my mother. And so my dad is one of those around the watering hole at work, comes home, and my mom's like, what are you guys talking about now? And I think, and I eat Fox News, and I think a lot of us in the audience have had, we can talk about neighbors, but we have problems in our own families. Like, we've had different ideologies that have festered through COVID, when it comes to the vaccination, when it comes to the presidency of Donald Trump. And it's totally pitted us against one another. So I took this opportunity to bring my dad. And my mom, because my mom's a lifelong Republican whose hair's on fire about women's rights, and I know she's going to vote Democrat. But back to my point is, I walked in, my dad sat through the convention, and he was a little bit of celebrity status, farmer ed. And I walked in on Father's Day, and I said, Dad, sorry I didn't give you a gift. And he said, look, this weekend was a gift in itself. He said, I had an epiphany. I I was sitting at this convention with 1,000 other people, and I stopped and I realized they're just very nice people who want to do the right thing. And maybe I need to step back from my politics and, start voting with my heart and my head again. And I said, that's great, Dad. I really appreciate that. So he will be voting for me. But we've just pitted ourselves so far in politics that we have to start seeing each other again and not our political identity. Thanks.
Bipartisanship is so important to the future of our country. We need to get back to loving each other again as Americans, even though some of us are Republicans and some of us are Democrats and some of us are Libertarians. I think that's a lost art that we need to find again in America. I served in the United States Navy for 6 years. I was on a nuclear fast attack submarine for 4 years. And I would estimate, and I know Destiny is a veteran also, I would estimate on my submarine 75% of the people I served with were Republicans. And yet, the people I served with trusted me with their life. If something went wrong, I was there for them, and they were there for me, and they knew I was a Democrat, and I knew that they were Republicans, and we still got along like brothers. We loved each other, we would have died for each other. And then, I go into elected office, and suddenly I meet Republicans, and I'm nice to them, and they hate me right off the bat. And I don't understand it. And by the way, I've been bipartisan my whole life. My dad's a Republican, also Destiny. My mom's a Democrat, and I'm still working on my dad's vote. I'm not sure if he's there, I'll be honest with you. But I think, my whole life I've been balancing the divide between Republicans and Democrats, and I want to be the type of senator like Joe Donnelly. I'll be honest with you, I thought Joe did a great job of trying to be bipartisan and work with the other side, and I want to be that type of senator. And I'm not just going to mention a Democratic senator who is one of my idols. I think Senator like John McCain was an awesome senator also, right? And while I'm at it, I'm going to say I think Richard Lugar was an awesome type of senator. The type of senator is bigger than party politics. The type of senator cares about one thing: America. Well, and the state of Indiana. And that should be the two guiding principles I take to Washington, D.C. when I become your new U.S. Senator. I'm going to push for America, and I'm going to push for Indiana. I'm going to fight like Alpha Wolf. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Well, as some of you might know, I'm in the 5th district now, but I ran twice in the 6th district. Before they moved Muncie with the census and the gerrymandering and the redistricting, Muncie and Delaware County used to be in the 6th, now we're in the 5th. That being said, I grew up in Crawfordsville, I got brown skin, got melanin in my skin, and I ran in a district that was 93% Caucasian. I ran the first time against 5 white guys, 2 amazing, great orators, lawyers. One passed on, Jim Pruitt, some of you know him. Lane Siegman, 2 of the best Democrats I know. But you know who they chose? Jeanine Lee Lake. Fast forward to 2018 and 2022, same thing. 2022, I won in every single county. Tipton, Delaware, Hamilton, Howard, Grant. There's no one in there. Madison. People aren't, not only us, the Democrats, we're not looking at color, we're looking at what a person can do for us and our family and our future generations. And really and truthfully, so are Republicans. They're also looking for that. So are independents and so are Libertarians. What we have to do is convince them that we're actually the party that delivers. We are the party that delivers. We're doing it. We're doing the work. And I was able to pull, when I was running against Greg Pence, I was able to pull 36% of the vote. He had millions of dollars. I had barely $200,000 that I raised. I only want to just go to the places. I don't have to raise millions. I need gas money. So, that being said, the Jeanine Lee for Congress.com. So, we were able to pull 36% of the vote, which meant we only had 25% registered Democrats. I pulled 11% Republicans and Libertarians and Independents. And I'm going to do it again this time because I'm going everywhere. I need gas money to get there. This is a winnable race. One of the few. I lost by 4%. message right now with victorious hearts. Help us get there.
So you said the question was, how do we get along? And let me take the big picture view and look at our founding, our charter, right? What is it that we set out to do as these United States of America? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our mission statement. That's why we are. That's the song of the human spirit. That's our mission as Americans. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So how do we do that and live together? And the libertarian solution, the libertarian philosophy and approach is very simple. It's live and let live. You get to live your life, I get to live mine, we stay out of each other's hair. And that's worked for tens of thousands of years for humanity and humankind. So how do we enact that? Where do we go wrong? Well, things get complicated when we share things, like we share roads, we share water systems, sewage systems, militaries. And how do we finance those things? How do we pay for them? Who pays for them? How do we secure our borders? Those are complicated issues. But if we can remember, at the end of the day, that we respect each other, and that we respect each other's right to their life, their liberty, their pursuit of happiness, then those three guiding points are what we can take away, we can all enjoy. There's more liberty for all of us. So, to answer that question, the philosophy is we need fewer rules for all of us and more individual autonomy, more individual liberty to enjoy life, liberty, and our each own pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Closing in 15 minutes. Staff member for assistance in finding and checking out your selection.
We've been very warned, I suppose. I'll share what I'm trying. I am trying to heal our community, heal our city, heal our state with compassion and bravery. I think one of the things that stuns me about what has happened at the State House, especially this last session, has been an utter lack of compassion. Utter lack of compassion for women, for teachers, for LGBTQ plus community, for victims of gun violence. An utter lack of compassion, and I think number one at our State House should be for Hoosiers, for our elected officials who are there to represent us. Just do no harm. And if we can get them to do that would be amazing. So compassion, and I try compassion and have difficult, challenging conversations with neighbors who may not agree with me on anything, but able to listen to them and learn from them, and with compassion treat them as a neighbor. You will never hear me say our problem is Republicans. That's not true. Republicans are our neighbors. Our problem is the State House supermajority, that's for sure. But our Republicans are our neighbors. And then bravery. So I'm well trained working with the supermajority. I'm one of 2 Democrats on our Fisher City Council. Bravery I need every day, and so do you. Because in order to heal our communities, we also have to speak with loud voices, calling out bad behaviors and things that are unacceptable. It is unacceptable to be in this public library and have a few individuals with loud voices challenge books that are on the shelf of a public library. I represent frequently the organization PFLAG here in our community. And PFLAG, if you don't know, is a nonprofit organization. We have a Fishers chapter that helps the parents of the LGBTQ plus community, those adolescents who are frankly one of the most bravest individuals I have ever met, and their parents support them with full hearts, just as our community should.
Yeah.
Compassion and bravery, and that is our challenge for all of us. It's not easy, but that is what it's going to take to heal our community.
Thank you for this question. First, I want you to look around the room. Look at your neighbor to your left, look at your neighbor to your right. This is the first thing we need to do to have a conversation about how we get along. We have to sit at a table, and even with those who disagree with us, we have to be able to have real conversations about real things. It's time that we stop letting petty differences from letting us see our neighbors. In politics, this is difficult. In politics, we often use, she mentioned bullets, we often use restrictions and force to force our neighbors to view things that we want them to view our way. But that's not how we make change. We don't make change through aggression. We make change through ideas and democracy and good debate. This is what I want to bring to politics. We've lost the humanity in politics. And as a public servant, I recognize that my first job is to serve you. But I also want to bring a heart to Washington. I want to show that it's more than just talking, screaming on both sides. We can come up with real solutions that benefit all our neighbors. All of our rights for all of our neighbors all the time. It doesn't matter what community you come from. I'm going to defend your constitutional rights. I'm going to defend your freedom of speech. This is important to me, and it's important that we bring that heart back to politics.
We noted that it wasn't until the end of the event that we finally figured out how to use the microphone.